say by means of introduction, I'm a singer-songwriter by trade and not an academic. I went to music school and I love being in the academic setting, but I feel that as we talk about the Psalms, we are all gathered here really because of the Psalms and because of God's hymnal, because of these poems that we've been given. And so I want to kind of open the conversation as a participant in the Psalms and not as a scholar or an expert or any kind of, I want to welcome you into that and also just ask God's Spirit to be with us that He would visit us as we come and kind of kneel down before what a rich heritage we have in these Psalms. And in the course or in the description of this workshop, it's even just the idea that we would come in and not want to give a superficial telling of the Psalms, but we can't do that in an hour. We do that with our lives. We participate. We sit with this book and with these poems, and they begin to, for me, they've really shaped me since I was a little girl, and my mom had just become a Christian before I was born, and she would write out, I remember some of my earliest memories being 3 or 4 years old, and she would write out little parts of the Psalms on index cards for me to memorize. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless His holy name. These little parts that just became, they just got in my bloodstream, and have followed me around in all kinds of different changes of life season. And so I feel like even as I love hymns and I've studied hymns and participated in hymns as well, they're woven tightly with the Psalms, maybe first and foremost. And so it is really, this last year I made an album of Psalms, and I didn't actually know, so a friend of mine that I met a couple years ago, I probably met here at Calvin, Isaac Wardell, who does music director in Charlottesville, Virginia. We were looking through songs that I had been writing, and he said, I think you've got like an album of Psalms, and then you have a bunch of other narrative songs as well, but I think this is that. So once he put words around that for me, I was like, oh, you're right, because I had been sitting in them in a devotional practice for more intensely than, for a few months during this difficult season of life. And so then this album was sort of born accidentally out of devotional practice, and I didn't know I was writing them for other people. And we can talk kind of more about that as we go through different song examples. So for me, I just love to walk through songs together, and feel free to ask questions or we'll see where it goes. I have things prepared, and I just want to see like where the Spirit takes that in our conversation together, and what you all need to hear, and He knows that more than I do. So can I just open us in a word of prayer? Open my lips, O Lord, and my mouth shall proclaim your praise. Holy Spirit, we invite you and we acknowledge you're already here. Is the Spirit here? He is. And as we confess that, we know that you've given us great gifts in words and in song and in melody, in the ability to play instruments, and the ability to raise our voices in praise to you. And that as we join in this room with people representing so many stories and places around the world even, you know each of us so intimately, and you know every hair on our head. You know what we need to hear from you today. We know and trust that you will give us the coordinates for where we need to go next. That you are the good shepherd who speaks to our souls. And so we just invite you, and breathe deeply, and that at the end of this time together, if we know nothing else, we would know we are loved by you. and that would inform all the coordinates, all the action, all the words, all the efforts of our lives and our hands. Pray your blessing upon us now. And we pray with expectation, because you, it is in your very nature to have mercy. So we ask that you would have mercy. Pray this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Spirit. Okay, so there's a little background in there. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. My mom taught me songs. She taught me lots of hymns and took me to church. My dad loved rock and roll music, still does. And so those things kind of merge a little bit in terms of song and style. And so the first slide is, so these, by the way, I'm not a photographer, but these are just little pictures that I've gathered up that reminded me. I just put pictures of life and things I've seen. It's kind of hard to see it. But this idea of our voice, so thinking about my mom and dad, the kind of music they liked, and thinking about church history, the people that have sung psalms in different cultural incarnations. He put a new song in my mouth. He continues to do this. He continues to give a new song. It's one of the features of God's Spirit working in his people. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. And what I love about that part in Psalm 40 verse 3 is that it doesn't stop with the song in my mouth. Like, it's not just for me. And it is by way of that I experience healing when I'm singing songs or praying songs. We experience healing as individuals, but it's not, we are not the ultimate end of that, that it's this flowing out of God's Spirit that goes out to us, to the neighbors, to the people in our house, to the work we do, to the pile of laundry, or the math assignment we have next week, or the just the ins and outs of our days. These songs are gritty with real life, and the songs that we sing go with us in that. So the melodies of that matter, and as much as we can study writing melodies, even there, God is the author, and he takes it and then works it into our lives and into our voices, and then sends it on to other people, that we participate in the larger family of God by way of the song. So many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. So the first song that I would love to just play, and maybe I'll just do portions of the songs because for the sake of time, but this first one is from Psalm 43, and it's a lot of it's really direct from the text. It was very close to the text as I was writing it. And so Psalm 43 says, "Vindicate me, O God, and defend my cause. Against ungodly people, from the deceitful and unjust man, deliver me. For you are the God in whom I take refuge. Why have you rejected me? Why do I go about mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? Send out your light and your truth. Let them lead me. Let them bring me to your holy hill and to your dwelling. Then I will go to the altar of God, to God my exceeding joy. And I will praise you with the lyre, O God, my God." Which I changed to be the word guitar, because I thought it was like the embodiment of, I wanted the instrument to play. And then it goes on to another refrain. "Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God." This psalm and the high point of the psalm being there, verse 3, "Send out your light and truth and let them lead me." This is one of those that has a rich emotional, you can just feel the emotion as it comes off the page. And so I like playing this one first. Sometimes at concerts or performances, I will start with this without any introduction, because it feels like this, I feel like God has written this one into me, and sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, and this was one that just kept coming up. It kept coming up in the lectionary. It came up, I was in D.C. Visiting a beautiful Catholic cathedral, and I went in and they were doing it, and it was like being recited in the front, and I just felt like, it keeps surprising me around every corner and for a season of time. And sometimes I think you'll find the way I was practicing. I had just really started practicing the daily office, so reading the Psalms through this. Okay, this is morning, this is night, and then I was always kind of surprised at how certain passages were electrified toward that. So I like playing this one first because it feels like it speaks itself. So when you hear, if you haven't heard one of the songs I've adapted before, I'm coming out of a tradition of singer-songwriter world. So I've been doing that vocationally for about 15 years. And then in the last few years, shifting into church music more squarely, where I really hope and want to study what it is to sing a corporate song. But it wasn't my first voice or inclination, because I grew up as a kid writing songs and like in middle school, and they're all songs that were tailored to my own expression or the sound of my own voice. All kinds of self-absorption as a 12, 13-year-old girl, like, writing about my feelings. And, it's actually fits really well even as a 38-year-old. It's like, that's still what I'm doing. I'm just trying to submit myself to the psalmist's instruction and to God's instructions. What do we do with the feelings? And how do we bring them under the lordship of Christ in a way that is not diminishing our anger or diminishing our sadness, but saying it's not going to guide the ship for you. It is going to be, there are a lot of, Newton talks about that, just these images of, I think it was John Newton in one of the letters that said I'm really bad about referencing quotes, so I'll say them and then we'll figure out who they are later as we need to. But talking about this, that my emotion is not the ship, that the storm is not guiding the ship, that it's being pulled through, and that Christ is sailing and pulling. So in the middle of those stormy moments, whether it's in the middle of the night or circumstances, or even in the frustration of traffic on the way to work, or Sunday morning, how about that? Trying to get everybody into the car. The storm of like frustration, knowing and centering ourselves in the anchor of Christ, and just kind of holding ourselves in this place of saying, okay, it's okay to feel it, and it's not going to define me. And probably in about 10 minutes, it's going to be a little better than it is right this second. You know, my sister said that to me about a year ago. She was like, okay, take some deep breaths, wait about 10 minutes, and you're going to be amazed at like what change happened. And there are obviously situations that are much more traumatic and that require more time and healing and, you know, counseling and all kinds of things. But on the ordinary storms of daily life, that is the thing that has given me a lot of encouragement. So the other thing I noticed about Psalm 43 is the use and complexity around the word joy, and what it is to hold space. Whether we hold space or not, it's happening. But there's joy, and there's as someone who's walking with Christ and submitted to Christ, when we engage in the world and circumstances, we are holding joy and sorrow at the same time. And these tensions that seem like they would be in opposition, they are somehow existing in this mystical, joined way. Sometimes I think of it like joy is the undercurrent of the river, and there's a lot of things at the top. And so sometimes like the surface water will peel back and you just feel the joy bubble up. But the joy is always there at the bottom of it, for someone who is hidden in Christ. And it doesn't mean happy, it means something else. It means, it also makes me think the difference between optimism and hope. So optimism would say, oh, it's really okay, just smile, it's gonna be right, it's gonna be fine. And I don't think that authentic Christianity calls us to optimism. I think it calls us to a wide, rich hope that takes the time to be attentive to each other and to ourselves in the moments of loss, in the moments of celebration, that we wouldn't just lob off the highs and lows, but that we would live more broadly. The Psalms help us to live fully in the joy and the way that the people of God in older cultural traditions where weddings would be a very long stretch of time. It was not just one day, and then, or I think about the church calendar and how Easter, I grew up not really aware that Easter had been celebrated in the church calendar for a long period of time, for 9 weeks after the day, after all the chocolate had been eaten. We're still celebrating. So finding ways, so at my little church parish, that we've started trying to think of what can we do to celebrate. We sing, have extra nights of singing. Last year we had like a dance party in the middle. And it was like we're dancing at YMCA, and it's just this thing of, we all get out there kind of like fools, but we are trying to say, we want to posture ourselves toward the highs and lows of life, because even though it feels safer to live in the middle, we're missing some of the richness of the human experience that we were meant to have. So I love the way Psalm 43 talks about, to God my exceeding joy. And I was really captured by that. And when I wrote this song, it was the melody to it, it was in a season of lament. So there's another one we'll get to in a minute that was a similar thing, where I was feeling heavy lament, but then the song came out as joy. And I didn't craft that. I couldn't give that to myself. I think His Spirit supplants that. And He supplants it. He provides the grace you need in the time that you need it. And so if you're gonna, I don't know, I think, as John Newton wrote, Faith's Review and Expectation was the title for Amazing Grace, the original title. Faith's Review and Expectation, which I love that he called it that, in the sense that this is the practice of, okay, we look back and we see that God met us, and so we're sitting here afraid that He's not going to meet us again. But we got to look back and celebrate that He has met us, and look ahead toward the expectation that He will keep on meeting us. So the next slide, Psalm 113. Oh, by the way, that was my son on the top of a rock in a hill in North Carolina. Send out your light. So I just love that image of him standing up on that rock. And so Psalm 113 is another one that I set to music for the, well, I was on vacation with my family and at the beach and was spending time with Psalm 113, and I wanted to set it to music for maybe for congregational singing, or it was just coming out of a devotional moment, and I played it for our worship. I was at a different church at the time, but I played it for the worship minister, and she felt like it was kind of not, it didn't quite work because it changed throughout the song, so it wasn't uniform enough for congregational song. But I put it on the album anyway. But that was much later, and I think I kind of forgot about it and then found the little voice memo of it at the last minute, and it went on the album. But it brings up a question of use, and yesterday in the songwriter workshop we were talking about that, and I was curious if you all had questions or thoughts around that. Sometimes a song might be useful for corporate singing. Sometimes it might be devotional for private use, like for your expression of writing it. Not just that it would end with you, but that it would just be part of the experience you need to have. But I just kind of wanted to pose that question for those of you that are writers. You know, how do you value or measure the value of what you're making? You know, what makes a song worth keeping or playing again? And how do you know? You guys have any questions or thoughts about that? Or some of you in corporate music settings, like worship leading, and curious, what do you think? What makes a song useful or valuable? What gives it value? Necessity.
That you need the right song.
The content. So like I need a lyric about adoption. You know, we want to use that.
And it needs to fit with these two readings because.
Two readings, yeah. I do a lot of that, yeah. That's great. Okay. Other questions or thoughts? Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes, at least for me, for congregational singing to like how singable is it for the average person in the congregation who aren't necessarily professional musicians.
Mm-hmm.
So taking into account range and pieces of a melody that are repetitive enough for them to catch it quickly, but then also trying to decide, like, is that enough in and of itself as the shell? Mm-hmm. Or do you have the verses that surround it that are for, a soloist or a choir to take that piece up? But I think when it comes to the congregational singing, it's always my highest concern to make sure they can sing it. Mm-hmm. And with ease so that they can enter in and really worship with it.
Yeah, I grew up as like the special music kid, so I didn't have to think, I was always like, okay, the offertory, and so there's a moment where it wasn't necessarily for everybody to sing, but still function in a way that was meaningful in the service, and that I felt like that was valued. Incidentally, I'm 38, and when I was little, I grew up at a Presbyterian church in St. Louis, where we had an organ. So we had traditional choir, organ, robes, so there were formal aspects of the service. And then on the other side, there was a pianist who played like praise and worship songs. And there was not, this was before there were worship orders around that. So it didn't, just a couple days ago when we were here having a conversation, it had never occurred to me that how important it is to have been raised in an open space where there wasn't contention between those two things, so that I could come up as a little girl and learn to adapt hymns, write new songs, sing some for special music, participate in the choir, all of these different ways that we can experience song as a family, not to, and to have like a wide context for that. I think it was. I think it begs the question of like how can we create that kind of peace, not just peace, but like fertile soil for creativity with our congregants and with young people. And sometimes it's a matter of like with the word hymn, and how do we think about the word hymn, and with psalms there's kind of a close connection there because there's meter and there's rhyme and there's sort of cadence and how all those things fit together. It's really important and great to study that, even though we can't fully master it, but I think it's a worthwhile thing to do, to study the hymns that we love, the melodies that we love, like some of the Irish melodies, the Water is Wide melody, or they just never cease to bring out life in a text to me, and why is Come Thou Fount, why is that so enduring? What is it about the ones that really work, and how do we, and is it possible to learn from that, sit at the feet, and sit at the feet of the hymn. I don't know, that's kind of weird, but you know what I mean. But in those melodies, so that's great. Appreciate your thoughts on that. So that slide, meaning Psalm 113, I won't play that song, but it's on the album, and it ends up being a little short piece. And then I was in the Netherlands in November, and they had done a translation of it in Dutch, and it was so beautiful and used in a similar congregational context. So it does have like an A, B, and a C, but parts of it repeat enough to where sometimes I think if you're trying to stay really true to the text, be open to breaking the rules if you're a writer. Like be open to so simple, something for people to repeat and hang on to, but be creative and allow space to be creative in it. I think I mean not everybody's for that, but I'm all for that. I will champion you in that if you go that route as a writer. So okay, then the next one that I wanted to mention is a song from, this one is called My Help, My God, and it's from Psalm 42, which is connected to what we were just talking about a little bit, in the sense that the best way, one of the best counterbalance to self-indulgence as a musician, just speaking musically, is community and being. So if you're a writer, getting together with other groups of musicians, and even non-musicians, actually, a lot of folks that are some people are not trained in instruments, or even may not have a great voice, but have a sensibility of words and poetry. And I remember just after college, my roommate, so there's a lot of musicians in the community, and we had all come through music school, and then my roommate that I met came in from out of town, and she was not a musician at all. But what she brought to the gatherings was so rich, and she always felt a little like, I'm not the musician, but it brought so much to the conversation and the songs. And when we would sit and have spaghetti dinner and sit with our guitars, she brought so much to it as someone who, worked a completely different job, And so we need each other. We need to be in community and practicing psalms and music in those ways. And the reason that makes me think of this song is, so this is a song called My Help, My God, which is based on Psalm 42. But when I was writing it, so I have a almost 7-year-old and an 8-year-old. And they are always kind of in the background. So sometimes my voice recordings, like you hear all the chaos and like your song idea, chaos in the background, mommy, like something going on. And but one of the things that's come out of that is like this song, there's a high part on the piano that my daughter would always play, and the two of them would sing it. And the chorus is a little squeaky for my voice, it's a little bit high, but it was perfect for her voice, for their singing voice. And it works in a congregation, and it ends up juxtaposed with the mournful, questioning quality of the verses in this and in the psalm. It juxtaposes this little chorus, put your trust in God, I will yet give thanks to him. And I think of my daughter's little songbird voice, and that's one of those examples that it gets in your bloodstream, and you're carrying it, you're bringing in the groceries, and this, this melody, how do we experience God's new song that reminds us powerfully, I will yet give thanks to him, always and everywhere. Whether I'm experiencing pain or joy or everything in between. So I'll play a little bit of this. just thinking about, it's another one that juxtaposes joy and sorrow, just the way the psalm sits and the way that God's Spirit infuses in that. And the day we recorded it, so the album came together pretty quickly. I had some friends that I played with in Brooklyn and was coming up for some other work and said, hey, we should just set up in the living room and record. As it turned out, it was a really nice living room. It was another person I hadn't met yet. And so he had this view of the city, of the whole skyline. And so I walked in and kind of took my breath away for a minute. I was like, okay, this is, you know, and when we came in, that was one of the first songs we recorded. And I feel like there was an emotion at the time that even as the end of the song, like my voice kind of broke up as we were performing it. And I remember the very end, I had to take a break after that song and went down, there was a little market on the corner and I just was like, I gotta go get some chocolate or something. I was like, I need to get out of here. So I remember like standing in the chocolate aisle and just kind of really, like I was so wrung out by what it is to, I mean, the triumph of playing music together, but also that God enters in with this and allows us, gives us space. He makes space for us to feel. And he doesn't, and he's patient because sometimes we don't want to go there. And it's not convenient to go there. You can't, you know, get lunches packed in the morning if you're going to go there all the time. Like, you have to live your life, but you also have to feel, we are called to feel deeply. And I think that passage when, I think it's Jeremiah 30 and 31 when he's saying, in quietness and confidence is your strength. But you would have none of it. You ran after all this. And then the next part says, therefore the Lord waits to be gracious to you. And I think he waits. He's just waiting to meet with us. And when we get quiet enough for a few minutes, a few more minutes, and then we get past the awkwardness of the silence and the fear of being silent, then we begin to hear his gentle call to us. And I think in the moment, and when I listen back to that recording, I realize, like I can hear how I was feeling at the end of that moment, and I can hear that it's like, it feels to me like Peter on the beach, like, where else would we go? You know, my help, my God. And I will declare this, but I don't really like all the things I'm feeling. And so I think that there's a lot of healing in having those kind of honest, God brings healing out of that place of getting, really talking with him. Like he just wants to talk with you, like somebody, like your friend across the table. And more than across the table, but also across the table. You know, he is our Savior. We understand this in worship and in high church, and we understand this in creeds and in theology, but do we understand it like a cup of coffee and a friend? And I think there's space in the Psalms for us to know God in that way. And it's a little unsettling, honestly. Like, just, I remember early days of this project, of sitting at the counter after the kids were in school for the morning, and I was singing little phrases of psalms as I was just singing them into the kitchen, and beginning to talk to him and say, I just don't understand, and I want to talk to you about it. And then other times where it was like, do we believe it's okay to really yell, really get angry? And are we engaged with our stories and the neighbors, and the stories of the people around us, to the point where we would appropriately feel those kinds of emotions? So the next slide, I think we're still on track. Slide number 7 this next one is based on Psalm 19, which is a very long psalm, and I pulled like just a little section of it that I think in bringing it up, it's interesting to note that, so this is a little verse, I will run in the way of your commandments when you enlarge my heart. And the psalm is, if I were to summarize it, it's all about loving the law of God, which is not a thing we talk about a whole lot in our cultural moment. We don't like rules. We don't like being confined. But actually, limitations, boundaries, rules, guidelines are a friend to creativity. They help us to cultivate. I just read this book by Anne Morrow Lindbergh that was written in the 50s, and it's called A Gift from the Sea. She talks about this image of like having a watering can, and you have a garden, and then there's a big field behind the garden. So if you're trying to water the whole field, you're going to run out of water, and your garden's going to be the bits. You know? But if you use the watering can that's appropriately made for the garden given, then you can see beauty, flourishing, and harvest come out of that space. So maybe that means saying no to more things, taking on less. One question for you all is like, is it possible to really make space in our lives? And what would that look like? Whether you're a student or, in parenting land or pastoral work, is it possible to make space, and what does it look like? Could be your thoughts could be practical, or they could be. You guys have any thoughts about that? Like, I really wonder, is it possible? Do you have things that work for you as far as making space?
You mentioned earlier the divine office, and I found it really helpful to have those set times. Like at 12:30, we're going to midday prayer. Whatever else is going on, I'm going to set that down now. We're going to go to midday prayer, and that's not the kind of big space that maybe it takes to hear most carefully, but it is an important marker that then draws us back into other times when we might sit and simply speak.
Yeah. And in those moments, do we, at the end of a moment like that, even if it's a short one in the middle of the day, do we get quiet enough to experience God's love for us? Do we know at the end of that moment of silence? Do we just think, oh, I did the thing? Or do we think, like, I feel better because I did the thing. Like I made space. Or do we hear, like, that God is pleased with you? It doesn't matter what you did right before. Like, you engage with them, tell them you're sorry, work it out, and then receive. Like, I just wonder if some of the space making has to do with either asking the question, leaving it in the room, but beginning as a practice of that the fruit of that would look like our feeling more settled in His hands, and in knowing that we're okay and that He's with us. This Emmanuel idea. So I will let me play Flourishing. This is a little bit of Psalm 119. give and take. So when I was in the Netherlands, some of the folks I was with spoke really clear English, but at one point, one of them asked me, she said, tell me what flourishing, what does that mean? Because I added that word as just the kind of pulling that idea in together from the song. So I took some liberty with that. And it was, what a great moment to try to explain what is flourishing. It's like a plant, and it's fully doing everything. It's like doing everything you're supposed to do. Everything it was made to do, like full bloom. And you see the seed, and then you see it coming up out of the ground in the green. And the flourishing is just it's like the abundance of being in some way. And the exchange within that interplay with repentance in the psalm. Like, okay, I'm asking for your correction. I'm asking to be planted where I am, and show me how to grow and how to be what I'm made to be. And his attentiveness to that in the smallest details of our lives is such a gift. I know we're kind of winding down on time a little bit, but I want to mention Wolterstorff, Nicholas Wolterstorff, who is here this weekend, has a concept that's really influenced me. In his book, Hearing the Call, he talks about in every worship service that there would be trumpets, ashes, and tears. That we would have this range within our service that would say trumpets of celebration, ashes of repentance, and tears of lament. And so when I'm mapping out a service for our Sunday service, I think of trumpets, ashes, and tears. I think of it when I'm making an album. I think of it, I want to say I think of it when I'm making pizza. But how do we live in a way that's like, can we live these things and hold them together? I think it's such an attractive trilogy because you realize you can it's a wide space to walk around in. You don't have to pretend or box yourself into just the smiley face. You don't have to live despondent and in tears on the kitchen floor. But there's a moment for that. And so I love that framework, and it's been really helpful. There's a quote, I'm skipping down a little bit on slide 9, where he talks about we strain to hear, but instead of hearing an answer, we catch sight of God himself, scraped and torn. And through our tears, we see the tears of God. I think there's a lot of lament infused in this work and in the Psalms. Somebody was telling me maybe like a third of them, or you could, if you're looking through the book of Psalms, it would be characterized as lament Psalms. And that is an invitation for us to, even when you're not in a moment of crisis or sadness, that we would hold space for someone else to have that and to not be dismissive of it or too quick to try to remedy it. And when we start holding space, Henry Nouwen talks about, he has a book called Reaching Out, and he talks about this idea of space is like hospitality of spirit. When you make peace with your own loneliness, you can offer space for somebody else without trying to fix them or cling to them, or to you don't have to get entangled in that way. But in this spacious way, I think it's what God enables in us when we can make peace with the loneliness and then invite other people to be who they are and to have space for what they need in it. And it's really hard, it's really hard. I think of hospitality, if I have people that come in my house, that drop by, and I love drop-ins, and it's a pretty regular part of life, but I find that I'm so accommodating and so busy trying to make sure they have do you need some tea? Do you need a warm up? What do you need? I don't just sit and can you just chill out and just be with them? I think this inner voice that I normally don't think about until after I close the door after they leave. And I think I want a restful spirit that invites them just to come and be, in my home in that way. So I think along those lines, I don't know if I have time to sing it. But the next slide is there's a song on the album that is, as far as writing goes, I wanted to mention it because it's a hymn adaptation. It's an adaptation of a hymn by, oh man, I'm gonna forget who it is right in a second. But it's an adaptation. You guys know Whatever My God Ordains Is Right? Is it Samuel Rodriguez? Do you know who it is? So I forgot who wrote this, but it's written down somewhere. And then added a chorus. But this one to me, and this is a picture, so my sweet dog of 13 years died last year. And so we had this beautiful moment to bury him in this field. And this is my daughter. It did rain a little bit. This was not staged. It was just such a moment of like, oh, and it was actually a very beautiful day. Like, I don't know how to explain that other than to say, we celebrated his life and entered into what it is to grieve as a family. Give my kids permission to grieve. And we lit a candle on the floor. We came back and they weren't there for the actual, we went back to visit, but they weren't there for the burial part. And then, and when we came back, we lit a candle. We gave him some time, like, tell me how you're feeling. She was so cute. My daughter was like, can we get another dog like tomorrow? And, you know, just like, she does like such personalities. And then my son like went to get one of his Nerf guns or something. I mean, it was like such different reactions. He just had all this energy inside and didn't know. But giving them each a moment to say, how do you feel? Like what, you know, and when you feel sad or you miss him, we've got this little candle, we're gonna remember him and just say, here is a moment to pause. And the comfort, the power of the word yet, that he is coming to make all things right, to, if there is a thing that is not as it should be, this is where the application of our hope in the resurrection comes in. And so this hymn, Whatever My God Ordains Is Right, coupled with, which I think is in this hymn, it says, His holy will abides. I will be still, I will submit myself to whatever he does and follow where he guides. And then added a chorus that says sweet comfort. Because I think the doctrine of, doctrines of God's might and power and all-knowing sovereignty, when we talk about those difficult and long argued over places in Scripture, I think that was intended to be a comfort when Paul talks about it, you know. I think it wasn't like, oh, you guys are really going to fight about this one. It was like, I'm trying to comfort you that God, he is holding your life. And you don't, and I think it pairs with this idea of, do we ask God the hard questions? And I think in my own story, I think it's just been really, I unfortunately, or I guess I look at it now as a severe mercy, but I have experienced like, I don't know how you're answering this way. This is not what I wanted this is not the outcome I wanted, you know? And having walked through a divorce a couple of years ago and pleading with God in some of this process. And yet I cannot deny his redemptive, restoring, I don't have those answers. I still don't have those answers. But I cannot deny his restoring presence. He has not left me in that for a moment. Not a moment. And he's okay with me yelling a little bit. And I have been so moved by, anytime this passage comes up, of Mary at the tomb. And she, like, in this moment where we see Christ weeping and meeting her. And the parish that I'm part of, we are called St. Mary of Bethany. And I just feel like this image of Mary who stands and well, first she hides out in the house. She hides out in the house, and then he comes and she says, Lord, if you've been here, this wouldn't have happened. And he knows he can and will raise Lazarus, and yet he stops and weeps. He fully engages in her and with her in this. And I think there's a lot of mystery to that. There's just immense comfort to that. And it's a demonstration of, for me, like how to move forward, how to proceed, and how to be in the world. and please come quickly, Lord, you know, and still hold that even in the joy and in the, you know, the moments that we see light breaking in, you know, because it's all in there together. So, well, I think I won't play that song, Sweet Comfort, but I will, maybe we'll close with a song. So if you want to skip down to slides, I don't know if I put the lyrics on it. You guys have any questions before we kind of discuss that song together? I think I
You
have.
spoke of your development of your mom with the memory cards and the music at your church. Are you doing similar things with your own children so you could help us with faith formation?
That's a great question. I would like to do more. I do. We have a little ride to school in the morning, and we do some. I mean, by God's grace, like we made a habit early on from day one of praying on the way and talking together. So in that prayer time, because I'm driving, I draw on the scriptures I learned as a little girl and heading out, so they'll do little repeat after me kind of things. And so we've learned quite a few of them, and I love that time together, you know. And then there's, you know, there are little moments throughout life. I think the church worship together in the community has been really good. It's actually been really good that I'm usually busy with rehearsal just before, for the 2 hours before, and they hang out and then they're part of it. But they have, it's almost like they have their own part and experience with church. And I have to trust that we're all going to take care of them because they're here on their own. And then like, and it's been, and then they'll come up with me at communion. So I'll come and gather them and then they'll come up with me. And I tell you, like, there are some weeks it's just like, just to be blessed in that way and to have these, both the communal aspects of it and then our little times at home. I think those have been anchors for us, you know, centering points. That's a great question. And I feel called, I want to do more. So it's, I think it's a huge responsibility. You know? So thank you. Any other questions? I'd love to sing one, We Will Feast in the House of Zion. This is not from a song, it's actually cheating a little bit, but it is scripture. And I think it's just one that I want to kind of speak over us as we close, where the people who survived, this is from Jeremiah 31, the people who survived the sword found grace in the wilderness when Israel sought for rest. The Lord appeared to him from far away. I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore I have continued to my faithfulness to you. And then at the end of the chapter says, I will turn their mourning into joy. I will comfort them and give them gladness for sorrow. I will feast the soul of the priests with abundance, and my people shall be satisfied with my goodness, declares the Lord. And what a blessing to hear that over us, God. So let's sing together. Let me see if I have. Yeah, here's the chorus.